David Moore thought it would be just another peaceful morning on the lake. A hobby fisherman from Michigan, he lived for these quiet escapes, the mist clinging to the water, the soft tug of the current, the stillness that felt like medicine. But that morning, the lake gave him something entirely different. His rod bent sharply, nearly yanking from his hands. Whatever was on the line fought like nothing he'd ever hooked before. After a tense struggle, he pulled it into the boat and froze. It wasn't the size of the base that shocked him. It was the deformity. A grotesque lump bulged from its neck, veiny, swollen, and misshapen. It looked unnatural, as if something inside was trying to claw its way out. David's hands shook as he dropped the fish into his cooler, unsettled but trying to dismiss it as a fluke. But then it happened again, and again, 3 more fish, all with the same sickening lump. The once peaceful lake now felt like a place hiding something dark. David called his friend, a marine biologist, for help. When they cut open one of the fish, what spilled out made David go pale and grab his phone to dial 911. What could possibly be inside a fish that forces a fisherman to call the police? For David Moore, fishing wasn't just a pastime, it was therapy. Every weekend, no matter the season, he loaded his small tackle box, packed a thermos of coffee, and drove out to the quiet Michigan lake he loved. Out there, away from the noise of town, the world seemed to pause. The soft slap of water against the boat, the hum of crickets on the shore, even the creak of his old wooden oars. It was the kind of peace David lived for. That's why the sight of the lump disturbed him so deeply. In his cooler, the fish seemed heavier than it should, its swollen neck pressing against the lid. When David dared to lift it again, the lump felt almost the size of his fist, rubbery yet oddly firm. A faint sour odor clung to it, nothing like the clean, briny smell of healthy fish. He sat back, unsettled, his thoughts spinning. Was it a tumor? Some kind of parasite buried under the flesh? Or maybe the fish had swallowed a piece of trash like a plastic bottle cap, and its body grew around it? He wanted to believe it was something simple, something harmless. But then came the second fish, and the third, and the fourth, each with the same grotesque swelling, each more disturbing than the last. By now, the pit in David's stomach had grown heavy. This couldn't be coincidence. Something was wrong with the lake itself. He hovered over the cooler, torn. Part of him wanted to throw the fish back and forget he'd ever seen them. Another part whispered that this was a warning, one he couldn't ignore. What if people had been eating fish like these for months? What if children were swimming in this water? David couldn't shake the unease crawling down his spine. He snapped the cooler lid shut, took a deep breath, and pulled out his phone. There was only one person he trusted to make sense of this, his friend Mark, a marine biologist. "Mark," David said when he answered, his voice low, urgent. "You need to come to the lake. I caught something, and I don't know what I'm looking at." Mark arrived at the lake within the hour, still wearing his university jacket and carrying a worn leather field kit. David felt a wave of relief as his friend crouched by the cooler, snapping on a pair of gloves with practiced ease. But the look that crossed Mark's face when he lifted the first fish drained that relief away. "These lumps aren't normal," Mark muttered, turning the base over in his hands. His brow furrowed as he traced the swollen growth with his thumb. "They look malignant?" David swallowed hard. Malignant? That wasn't a word you wanted to hear. "So it's cancer?" Mark didn't answer right away. He set the fish on a tray, took out a scalpel, and looked at David. "You sure you want to see this?" David hesitated, then nodded. The blade slid through the lump with a soft, wet tear. At once, a foul odor filled the air, sharp, chemical, rotten. Both men flinched. The tissue inside wasn't the firm white flesh of healthy fish. It was black, stringy, fibrous, as if the body had been rotting from within. David gagged, covering his mouth. That's not a parasite. That's not anything natural. Mark shook his head, grim. No, not parasites, not swallowed plastic either. This is far worse. He leaned in closer, adjusting his glasses. I've seen similar tissue in lab studies. These look like tumors triggered by exposure to toxins. The words hit David like a stone dropped into his gut. Toxins. His mind jumped back to the dozens of families who came here every weekend, fishing off the dock, children splashing in the shallows. His own niece had caught her first sunfish here just last summer. He forced himself to focus. You're saying the water's poisoned? Mark didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood, walked to the dock, and knelt. He dipped a sample vial into the lake. When he pulled it up, he sniffed the rim, then frowned. Do you smell that? David bent down. At first, it was faint, almost hidden beneath the normal scent of lake water. But once he noticed it, he couldn't unsmell it. A sour metallic tang, almost like bleach left too long in the air. The two men followed the shoreline a few yards. On the rocks near the bank, David noticed something else, streaks of discoloration, dark stains that looked out of place as though the stone itself had been burned. Mark crouched to examine them, his gloved hand brushing over the surface. These are chemical traces. They don't occur naturally. His jaw tightened. Someone's been dumping here. David's mind spun. A memory surfaced. A factory half a mile away, its smokestacks always curling gray over the tree line. He'd driven past it countless times, never giving it much thought, but he remembered seeing drainage pipes leading toward the back, toward the lake's edge. You don't think... He didn't finish the sentence. Mark straightened, his face pale. If waste has been funneled into the water, this isn't just a fish problem. It means everything in this lake is contaminated. The thought made David's skin crawl. How many fish had been pulled from these waters and grilled over family barbecues? How many children had swallowed a mouthful of this water while swimming on hot afternoons? And how long had it been happening right under their noses? He looked back at the cooler. The fish inside lay still, grotesque lumps pressing against their scales like warning signals. David's voice cracked. How many people have already been poisoned? Mark shook his head. We don't know. And that's the terrifying part. He sealed the sample vial and slipped it into his kit. But if I'm right, this isn't something we can't ignore. We need tests, and we need them fast. David stared out across the lake. The morning light no longer seemed calm and inviting. It seemed cold, concealing. For the first time in all his years of fishing, he was afraid of the water. David hesitated before dialing 911. His thumb hovered over the screen. Calling the police over a fish felt ridiculous, even to him. But then he remembered the smell in the water, the black tissue spilling from the lumps, the thought of children splashing in it. He pressed call. When the dispatcher picked up, her tone was flat and practiced. 911, what's your emergency? David swallowed. It's not a normal emergency. I caught fish from the lake. They're deformed, tumors everywhere. My friend's a marine biologist, and he says it looks like chemical poisoning. There was silence on the line, then a half-stifled laugh. Sir, you're calling about fish? David's voice cracked with urgency. Yes, fish that people are eating, fish that children swim beside. Please, you need to send someone now. An hour later, a patrol car pulled up beside the dock. Two officers stepped out, one carrying a clipboard, the other clearly skeptical. With them was a state environmental officer in a windbreaker, lugging a heavy case of equipment. The officers peered into the cooler. One grimaced, the other smirked. Looks like sick fish to me. You sure this isn't just nature doing its thing? Mark cut in sharply, his tone clipped. No, I've studied aquatic life for 20 years. These are malignant growths. I want water samples pulled immediately. The environmental officer nodded reluctantly and began unpacking testing vials. As he worked, another truck pulled up, this one belonging to the factory down the road. Two men in pressed shirts stepped out, their faces tight. "What's going on here?" one demanded. "We heard rumors that someone's accusing us of dumping." David stepped forward, fists clenched. "Don't play dumb. We all know those drainage pipes lead straight into the lake. You've been using this water as your trash can." The manager scoffed, adjusting his tie. "Completely unfounded. Our plant follows regulations. If fish are sick, it's probably natural disease. Happens all the time." Mark jabbed a gloved finger toward the cooler. "Does that look natural to you? This is not coincidence. 4 separate fish, all with the same grotesque tumors? That's contamination." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Families from nearby houses, weekend fishermen, mothers with children clinging to their legs. Murmurs rippled through them as they peered into the cooler. Someone whispered, "My kids swim here every summer." Another gasped, "We ate fish from here just last week." The tension thickened. David could feel the crowd shifting, fear blending into anger. The environmental officer stood, holding a test strip. His face was pale. "Preliminary readings are showing high concentrations of industrial chemicals. This isn't runoff from farms. This is direct toxic waste." The factory manager's jaw tightened. Those readings could be from anything. Household garbage, maybe. "Enough!" David snapped, his voice raw. "Stop lying. We all know where this came from." The officer straightened, turning toward the police. "I'll need to send full samples to the lab, but based on these results, immediate action is required." For the first time, the patrol officers' skepticism faded. Their smirks were gone. One pulled out a radio, muttering into it. The other eyed the factory men with growing suspicion. The community had gone silent now, all eyes fixed on the cooler, the sick fish, and the men accused of poisoning the water. For years, the lake had been a place of laughter and peace. Now it was a crime scene, and for the first time, the authorities were forced to act. The lake that once felt timeless now buzzed with flashing lights and urgent voices. Within days, investigators returned armed with equipment, maps, and warrants. The environmental officer who had first tested the water led a team along the shoreline, tracing the source of the contamination. It didn't take long. Behind a thicket of reeds, half hidden in shadows, they found them. Thick metal pipes snaking from the back of the factory, running straight into the lake. The ground around them was slick, stained with unnatural colors. One pipe still dripped a viscous liquid that smelled sharp and chemical. "Illegal discharge lines," the inspector confirmed grimly. "They've been dumping straight into the water." Back at the plant, records told the rest of the story. Pages of falsified reports showed years of deception, waste numbers doctored, chemical levels scrubbed clean on paper, while the real poisons flowed freely at night. When the lab results came back, they were damning. The fish tumors were confirmed as malignant growths caused directly by industrial toxins. No doubt about it. The grotesque lumps weren't random acts of nature. They were signatures of human greed and neglect. Police didn't hesitate. The managers who had tried to downplay the situation were cuffed on the spot, their protests drowned out by the sound of angry voices from the community. David stood off to the side, pale and shaken. His cooler still sat open beside him, the deformed fish staring silently like witnesses. He had thought it was just a strange day on the lake, a mystery for his biologist friend to solve. Instead, he had stumbled into the center of a massive environmental crime. His call to 911 hadn't been about fish at all. It had been about stopping a disaster, one that could have poisoned countless families if no one had spoken up. Cleanup crews worked through the following weeks, but the damage was already clear. Many of the lake's fish could not be saved, their bodies riddled with tumors too advanced to heal. A few surviving species were relocated to cleaner waters, a desperate attempt to salvage what little life remained. For the families who lived around the lake, the revelations hit like a storm. Parents who had proudly served their children grilled bass now wondered if they had unknowingly fed them poison. Swimmers who had splashed in the shallows felt their memories clouded with fear. The trust they once had in the water was broken. News spread quickly. Local media hailed David as the man who uncovered the truth. Headlines called him a hero, though he never embraced the title. "I only did what any fisherman should do," he told reporters quietly. "I just wish I'd known sooner." One evening, long after the cameras were gone, David returned alone to the dock. The cooler sat beside him, the first fish still preserved in ice. He rested his hand on it, voice low. "You told us the truth," he whispered, as if the silent creature had spoken through its suffering. The reflection stayed with him. Sometimes nature doesn't cry out in words. Sometimes it shows its pain in scars, in sickness, in wounds we cannot ignore. If only we dare to look closely. Would you have cut the fish open like David, or thrown it back without asking questions?